Craig Maclellan, welcome to Note My Objection.
Hello. Thank
Thanks
you for having
coming.
me.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
It's nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you too. So for people who are just tuning in, you are a dad of two. You live in Cohasset, former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, a little bit of everything in between. And you are doing the craziest thing of all and running for Norfolk County District Attorney. Is that right?
Yes. Running for Norfolk DA. Yep.
And how did you... We'll ask right on the front end.
Sure.
What made you, was it everything that's happening in Norfolk County now that prompted you to decide to run? Or do you think that it was something you've been thinking about for a while?
It's definitely something I was thinking about for a while.
Okay.
So, like these recent cases that I think, come to mind with everyone, those aren't the reasons that I'm running for.
Okay.
I think they certainly created more of an opportunity because I think it makes an incumbent a lot less formidable when they're confronting a lot of challenges. But I had actually considered running in the primary before all of this.
Which I think is good to know because there's so much attention around Norfolk County right now because of the Reed case, the Walsh case, everything that's, sort of all the peripheral issues that have, come and are still coming. And so I think there's so much attention on it that people are paying attention, especially now to this county. But, I think it's also important to, have new kind of fresh blood. We have this sort of system in Massachusetts where we have politicians. And I think even, down in D.C. where people are in office for a long time and sometimes we don't even realize maybe we need a change. But the change that you want to be that change for the Norfolk County.
Yes. And in fact, it's funny you mentioned that. I couldn't agree with that more. I think that, we don't cycle through candidates every once in a while. We see a lack of innovation in those roles. And I think the public deserves constant innovation. And so I will not just sit in that office interminably. If I'm elected and then reelected, I won't serve more than 3 terms. I will leave after the 3rd term if I'm lucky enough to get to that point.
Well, it's an interesting thing about, and we talk about term limits all the time. Everybody hears it sort of bandied around like term limits. We just saw Nancy Pelosi decided to step down, and so many people. It's a kind of an interesting perspective that it's like, oh, good for her. She stepped down. She's 80, but isn't that really what we want in both on the state level, the local level? On the federal level, we want representatives who are there for us, but we don't want them to become so entrenched that they, die in office or stumbling at the podium or having strokes. So,
yeah, I think when you have that approach, it kind of becomes this scenario, and this is what I think is one of the most one of the biggest threats to good government is when you have this perspective that it's an individual seat, right? So like say I'm elected as the district attorney and then I just keep going and going and going until I'm getting too old for it. I it becomes like this mindset where it's like, well, it's my seat. I've got to defend the seat. It's my job. It's nobody's job.
That's right.
These seats, they're public seats, right? They're positions of great responsibility to hold in trust for the public. And then at some point, you've got to, I think, have the self-reflection, the wherewithal to say, you know what, I've worked hard for whatever it is, whatever the terms are, right? 10 years, 12 years, whatever it is. And I think I brought about a lot of good change. But now I think that the community deserves a fresh perspective. And I think it's time for someone else to step up and sort of pass the baton to someone else and step down. And I think that mindset, I think, would encourage people to maybe, work harder and be more innovative while they're there, if they know that it's going to be more of a finite period of time.
And do you think, because we hear so much, this kind of drain in the swamp, and I think that's why, in today's world, so many people are disillusioned with the system that they feel like their vote often doesn't really make a difference, that no matter who they vote for, it's sort of all the same. Sometimes even whether it's a Democrat, whether it's a Republican, people, like you said, feel like sometimes our elected officials almost feel like this is my seat. I have to defend it. And I understand, growing up in a political system and and being around it. Yeah, of course, if you win, you have this sort of, anybody who's running for office has a little bit of an ego, and hey, I won and I want to win again. But what do you think it is about that when people get into office, so many, go in with the idea that we're going to change and do this, and then it feels like they do, it's almost like this draw that they get sucked into the system, and then, you 2-3 terms later, they're singing a different tune than they were on the front end.
It's a really good question. I think that my answer will just be my opinion, because I've never held a public office other than the local role I hold, which is school committee. I've been on that for 7 years.
And that's in Cohasset?
That's in Cohasset. That's a total labor of love, but in a lot of ways, it's like the job nobody wants. So it's.
But you know what? And I know education is very important to you, and has sort of shaped who you are as an adult and why you want to do this kind of stuff. And so, your job, your role is, what do you do on the school committee in Cohasset, correct?
Yes, in Cohasset. So you're in a 5-member committee.
Yep.
Each person has an equal vote, and your purview is, strictly speaking, it's policy and budget, and you hire and evaluate the superintendent of schools.
Okay.
There's a lot of operational overlay there too. Superintendents often rely on their committees for sounding boards for operational challenges that come up. I mean, schools are like, they're surprisingly busy and complex organizations. Because if you think about it, Catherine, right? They have there's a security element, there's a hospitality element because there's food service, right? There's obviously academics and education. There's a social emotional element. There's sociological elements. There's psychological elements. It's a really complex organization. It's kind of like a little village within a village. And so there's a lot to it. So we meet every other week, and then there's subcommittees as well. And we basically sort of govern the school district.
And that's, in a similar way, that gives you a little bit of sort of preparation for a job like DA, because, so many people, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, that so many people don't really understand sort of the function, like the real true function of what the DA's office is. And not only is it the chief law enforcement officer for the county, but really it's, it's an organization. It's kind of like running a business. You have a lot of employees in different areas. You have to deal with the budget, salary, all that kind of stuff. And so do you feel like what you've been doing on the school committee is in a way kind of prepares you for something like that?
That's a really good question. The answer is absolutely yes. And I'll tell you how I think it's prepared me best for the role. It's so again, I mentioned that I was thinking of running in the last midterm primary, right? So 22. I had come on the school committee in 19. And what I've learned from that, I view the Norfolk County DA's role as a super local role as well.
Sure.
Okay, 28 communities, not one, but this microcosm that is the school committee has opened my eyes to the power of visibility and accessibility. One, I think, change that I brought about when I came on the school committee is I made it more of a sort of like a household name, which was a little easier to do because I was the chair of it during the pandemic.
Yeah, I was going to say 2019. That must have been a lot of pressure.
Yes. So it wasn't pressure. It was people were super emotional, right?
Sure.
And their children are out of school.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Absolutely, right. But it opened my eyes, like I said, to this importance of when people would be, there was issues about getting back to school, issues about masking, issues about spacing. People had a lot of strong opinions about it. And I would constantly invite people. So my law office is, it's in downtown Cohasset. That's where my law office is. So I have this conference room there, and I'm able to use it. Like I'd invite people, hey, come on down. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk it over. Because a lot of people would take to, social media or emails or something like that. And that's just not, a lot can get lost in translation there.
It's just not I've realized is that it makes people feel, this sort of cathartic to them to let it out online, but it's not super productive. It's not, you don't often get real results that way. You need to talk to people in person. You have to have real conversations with people who might have different perspectives and be able to sort of, bandy them about and go back and forth.
I couldn't agree more. And so when I would sit down with people and have the discussions and invite them to the meetings, and then you'd see more and more people start. And we also, this was also one of the biggest changes for the school committee is that we converted to like a hybrid format. So it wasn't just in person. Now people could start to watch on Facebook, streaming and or the town page or the local cable access. Right? People were able to go, without having to go down to the meeting, right, on a Wednesday night when they've got kids.
Because not everybody can. There's a lot of things going on.
No way. So we now went from like basically 5 people talking in a room with no one there to now people are watching, right? And that has been a powerful thing because now people, before, I don't even know that people were really aware of what the school committee was doing.
I don't think so. But, it's a difficult, we're in an interesting time because on the one hand, people are really interested in politics, but at the same time, so many people don't really prioritize like gaining the actual knowledge about how things work. And so, and that's why I think it's important to have conversations like this, right? Because just sort of explaining the ins and outs of why this is important and what you should be paying attention to, and things like doing something like putting it on, the Zoom and then uploading it to a YouTube so that parents can see, okay, what's going on in our school system. This is, where we pay our taxes. This is who we vote for. What is the effect? What are the results?
This is who we can reach with any questions. Now we know who these people are, right? And so just building that awareness and being visible and being accessible, it is a major step, Catherine, on the path to good government.
Right. And
that is sort of the foundation. That's the guiding principle that I'm bringing to this race. I found that because I announced I was exploring last September, right? It wasn't until last May that I officially kicked the campaign off. And that's because I wanted to be deliberate about it. I wanted to make sure like my message was compatible with the needs of the community and that I thought that there was a real space for me to run and like my perspective. And I found that like the average person just doesn't know about the DA's office. They don't generally know who the DA is. This is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, right? And, I think you and I have a better understanding than most because we're lawyers. Right, we're in that world, and even more so, we were DAs. We worked as prosecutors, right? Like in criminal law.
And so, if we go back to that, so you went to you grew up in Cohasset?
I did not. I grew up
on the South Shore.
Yeah, on the South Shore, kind of Plymouth, then Duxbury. Okay, and then I lived in Boston for a while.
And then you went to BC High for.
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's funny. It's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I myself went to St. Bridget's in South Boston just through 6th grade, and then I went to public school to Latin Academy. And, I think a lot back on sort of like the fundamentals of like this Catholic school education. I know you went BCI and then you did Providence College. And so from this kind of the Jesuit teachings of, public service and like thinking, do you feel like that sort of helped form, kind of why you want to do things like be on the school committee, why you want to put yourself out, because there's a lot to it. You have to put your family out there. You have to take sort of criticism, be front and center. Do you feel that helped form sort of your desire to serve?
I think I never thought about it that way. I mean, the story of my history teacher that I had freshman year in high school. Yeah. You've heard that story before.
Well, tell everybody that.
Well, so I had this, I'll start off with the fact that BC High was a difficult experience for me. Okay, so I didn't have this. I wasn't like the super popular guy. I wasn't a really talented athlete. I didn't have any legacy. Like I didn't have any older brothers that went to BC High. That mattered a lot then. It was a long commute from home.
I bet. Would you take a bus up? Would you drive up?
Take a bus until I got my driver's license. But even when you get your driver's license, then you're driving in rush hour traffic as a 16-and-a-half-year-old kid. And it was like, it's pretty crazy, right? Yeah. And so,
But that also goes, that also shows, the effort you were willing to put in at a very young age, which is reflective of sort of the rest of your life.
Like I viewed it as kind of a challenge. I mean, it was like just not, like I said, it really wasn't going well. And I was like, I'm not giving up. I'm going to, and so like when I graduated, it meant something. I was like, So anyway, early on, I think one of my teachers had recognized that this was a difficult experience for me, and I won't name him because he doesn't know that I've been running around telling these stories. But
I'm sure he'll love it though. I mean, teachers, that's what they're teaching for.
This guy is unbelievable, right? He changed my life. So so I'm trying to. This is a long answer to your question, but so I go to his classroom. This is like early '90s, and late in the fall, my freshman year. I go to his classroom after school for some test prep or extra help or something like that, and I have a very vivid recollection of this moment in time because I do think it was like a crossroads for me. And he's in there, and they used to have these big drab, like 1960s curtains over these large windows on one side of the classroom, and all the teachers would always close them. And he was up there, and he used to climb up on the top of like the radiators because he was like a shorter guy, and and he get that, and he was
like
up there.
The pulleys.
Yep, the pulleys, right? Yep. Okay. And I mean, this is just an old school Catholic classroom, right? There's no frills in there.
Yeah.
There's a crucifix above the podium.
A little different probably from BCI today.
Totally different than BCI today. But this was like old school, okay? Yeah. So, and we come in there, or I come in there, and he's up there. He's standing up doing that. And he sees me. He was expecting me. He turns around. He says to me, "Hey, Craig, have you ever considered joining Model UN?" And Model United Nations. It's an extracurricular activity where high school students travel around to different conferences, usually at college campuses, and they participate with other high school students in simulating a United Nations General Assembly. Exposes them to diplomacy, global politics, service. Okay.
I mean, what a cool thing though to do it.
Cool. It was I hadn't even thought about it till that time, right? But I think he saw maybe
he saw something.
The origins of some interest in civil service, maybe. I don't know why he asked me this, but it changed my life because it set me on a course of sort of a path, and had me take a series of steps in life that ultimately would end up with me sitting here talking about running for North DA, right? And so, that was something that did instill some confidence in me. I had interest in it. I met a group of friends that had similar interests through that, and we had some great experiences. And it did improve my high school experience, which was still difficult, but it was still, I don't know that Model UN kids back then were the coolest kids on campus, right? So
that was like primetime BCCM hockey nights Friday,
right? Exactly. Like I don't know, maybe we were like maybe a step above the chess club at that point in time.
And it's and that's an interesting thing though. I mean, especially for kids now, and school's so hard for, and I'm sure you see it, in your role on the school committee that it's kids really school can be tough, but it's also important to remember. It's just you just sometimes get yourself through it, and then and then life's on the other side.
And adversity is good, right? Like I think that
adversity is really needed for we need it more than ever now.
We do. I mean, I think adversity is sort of it can be one parent of character, right? Yep. But as far as the overarching view of BC High, I think that they have this motto there, men for others.
Yeah.
Be a man for others.
Yeah.
And so maybe. Indirectly, that was obviously ingrained in me because I am very service oriented.
Yep.
So to answer your question, I hadn't really thought about it. I certainly attribute it to him.
We're all about prompting and thinking
teacher.
here, Craig.
Well, I know. I always thought I sort of always attributed to that particular teacher, but maybe it was the overall environment that I came up in those formative years.
That some of that sort of practicing in the Model UN stuff that opened your eyes to the law? Like what prompted you to go down that route?
Yes, what that did was it opened my eyes to that concept of dedicating your emotional, intellectual energy to the service of something greater than yourself, right? Just stepping back and saying, like, what are my strengths? Mm-hmm. What can I offer? How can I contribute to this like community I occupy, right? So that caused me to start to become interested in government. Okay. And so I started running for, like in college, I went off and sort of reinvented myself, ran for student government, was elected like freshman class president. It was a big sort of turning point for me. And that's in college was when I decided, like I started the pre-law society there and decided I think if I want to go into government, I should go to law school, right? And sort of learn the law. So certainly it contributed. And then when I was in law school, I was like, okay, what's some good sort of civil service position that I might enter into on an entry level? And that was how I met you when I had obtained an appointment as assistant district attorney under then District Attorney Dan Conley in Suffolk County.
And so what year did you start as a DA?
Well, some would say that I started in 2005, but as you know, a lot of us worked as student prosecutors,
Right.
where there's a SJC rule that allows law students that have completed certain coursework
Right.
to actually practice as
Before you pass the bar.
attorneys
Yep.
before you practice the bar. And so I served as it's called 303 student prosecutor in all of 2004. And in fact, I took all night classes that year and then beyond.
Yep.
Because I wanted to be over in the Chelsea District Court is where I learned how to be a prosecutor.
And you were at Suffolk?
At Suffolk, yeah.
Okay.
Suffolk County, Chelsea District Court. And to this day, I'm friends with all those people that I was, an intern for. I eventually was their coworker, but that's how a lot of guys like me that I didn't have any like connections. I didn't have any.
You didn't have it in anyway.
I wasn't like a Boston guy.
Right.
So I had to get out there and sort of, basically work for free for a year to sort of prove myself and learn the gig. And I was lucky. I was fortunate enough to get that appointment as assistant DA. And then 2005 I became official when I passed the bar. Then they moved you from what I think they used to call it legal assistant.
Yep.
Because they would hire you.
Yep.
You graduate law school, you still hadn't taken the bar yet,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
It's like, so you had this degree,
Right.
but you didn't have a license to practice law
Right.
yet. So they'd hire you as what's called a legal assistant, still under the same rule. And then once you passed the bar, you were sworn in as assistant DA.
You'll love this story. So, because I didn't get to 303 because I was working full time in the DA's office in the grand jury, going to school at night, and so then I go and I get hired, and then I realize, oh, I'm going to start in Dorchester Court, and I don't have a 303. I missed the deadline for it. I had to like appeal to the SJC, all this stuff. So it was like started off on the very front end, like, oh my God, out of all people, you should know what to do, Catherine. But it was a different experience for me because I got to watch people like you. Once at that point, you were up in Superior Court indicting cases. Most of my followers know that I worked in the grand jury and whatnot, and what an interesting. I always say, when I tell people about my time in the DA's office, for me, even before I was a prosecutor, it was really working in the grand jury where I understood sort of the function of everything and how things works. Because it's just, it's like in Suffolk County, there's a lot going on. Now, you probably did a couple years in district court before going to Superior Court.
Yes. So I had that student year in Chelsea.
Yep.
Then when I was hired, I got assigned to the Central Boston Municipal Court. That's where I found out I passed the bar exam. In that court, actually, one day I remember exactly where I was when I found out. My father called me because he was like hounding the postal workers, like, I need the letter,
Yep.
And then I got moved to the Dorchester division of the BMC. So we both had worked there. I mean, I feel like if you really want to cut your teeth, you got to work in Dodge.
And I know, I don't know if it's still the same in Suffolk, but it used to be that if you could make it in Dorchester as a baby DA, you could really make it anywhere.
Because it was one of the busiest courts.
Right. And I think, the really interesting thing is in that a lot of people, a lot of people go through the DA's office, obviously recognize this, but there really is no better place to sort of cut your teeth with trial work because you don't have a choice. There's so many cases. There's so many trials. I mean, you're just being, here's a file, go try the case kind of thing,
you gotta figure it out, yeah.
And, learning and so many people, you're watching all the lawyers and judges and all that kind of stuff. So by the time I met you, you were in the gang unit, maybe?
I don't know if I was in the major felony bureau or the gang and safe neighborhood unit. I'm not sure when I met. I feel like it was probably pretty early on. So it's probably major.
And what did you take from your time, seeing firsthand, there's so many facets to being a prosecutor, to, being a defense attorney. And, obviously that's more of what you do now, but what do you feel like was, what do you think was something that you took the most from your time in the DA's office? Is it working with victims? Is it, the community? If it's somebody who was in the, gang unit, you had to deal with the community a lot, people who are, the ones who are dealing with firsthand the issues every day on the streets of Boston. Like, how did that sort of, what did you take from that?
I think I have sort of two halves of the answer. One is
it was a complicated question.
Well,
if I'm being
like
honest,
it's
too many
because
parts.
one is like what's the biggest takeaway from being like a prosecutor, in and of itself, and then the overarching takeaway, right? The overarching takeaway is the amount of impact that role has on the community, right? And if approached with humility and professionalism and tempered zeal, you can do a lot of good. Someone that was a supervisor of mine, again, I don't want to name names, I don't want to embarrass anyone, had taught me one of the first things I learned. This guy, and you can probably guess who it was because you know all these people, but this guy, he was a supervisor in the Chelsea court when I started, and he said to me when I was a student, like starting out, and I'm like coming in here, like I'm like guns blazing, right? I'm like someone's name is on a complaint. I'm like this person's going down, right? They're a criminal, right? And it's like, and you're just very professionally immature.
Yes, yeah, and in a lot of new DAs when you first start, you're young.
You just don't get it.
Especially if you come right out of.
I was 24 years old.
I was on the back and I was 30 when I was on the older end. But most of the young prosecutors are, in terms of life experience, you don't have it quite yet. So you do is this kind of this feeling like I'm the prosecutor, go in, and you need those people to tamp you down a little bit.
You do. You need those people to sort of open your eyes to what the job is really about. Because I think a lot of people think, and the average person would think this, I think.
Yeah.
If I hadn't done this job, I would think, prosecutor's job is to try to put criminals in jail.
Right.
Right. And that's not really the job. Anyway, this guy said to me, I feel like I'm building up a lot of suspense here, and it's not that. But he said to me, always meet everyone with respect. And what he was talking about, that seems stupid. It's like, well, obviously everyone does that. But it's when you're confronting, people embroiled in criminal cases in district courts throughout the Commonwealth, okay? A lot of people, first of all, like 85% of the docket is connected to substance abuse or addiction somehow, in some way or shape or form. Okay, so a lot of people that are in those courts are not at their best at that moment in time, right? They're confronting some real legitimate challenges that you need to have empathy for. And you need to always, you don't know anything about this person other than the fact that like right there in that moment, they're struggling, whether it's an alleged victim, whether it's the accused, whether it's family members who are passionate about, their loved one's involvement in this, whatever it is, meet everyone with respect. And that I think about that all the time, still to this day, right? Because it makes a big difference. Because I see attorneys, I've seen like defense attorneys, assistant DAs, like, sort of like meeting people with something less than that. Sure. And it can really have, I think, a negative impact.
Well, I think too, and I'm sure, you've seen this, and there's all kinds of different personalities that, we look at everything that's going on in Norfolk County now. So you have bad apples everywhere you go. And, there were people that, that I was around coming up that were like as you described, that didn't really necessarily see the humanity in people, and I think one of the one of the most important things I learned was just because you can do something, just because you can prosecute, doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
And there sort of is this as you grow and learn, as a lawyer. You figure out, okay, there are things that are really bad and people who need real consequences. And we have to make sure, that we're taking those very seriously. And then there's also people who need breaks and, and then there's some place in between. But if you don't come at that with your own sort of humanity, then, it's difficult to, to see that people are human. And sometimes I think, unfortunately, there are people who end up in the system, whether they're as prosecutors or whether they're as police, that, see it as black and white, good, bad, you're a criminal, this is a crime, that's it. But, I think it's funny. I always tell people that really being in the DA's office was one of the more formative experiences, of my life, because it just taught me so much about so many things and really how much control you do have as a prosecutor, because if you want to be a stickler and if you want to be tough, you can be tough. And sometimes that's needed.
Sure.
And I think that's sort of sometimes what's going on now in the way we look at, things is that everything is nuanced, right? We have to look at the context. We have to be able to dive a little bit deeper instead of just looking at like, okay, this is Joe Schmo with this is what happened. That equals this,
Right.
Exactly. Everyone's different.
Right.
And so you spent your time in the DA's office and you've been gone for quite some time.
Yes. I think I left in 11.
Okay. And have you still been doing criminal work since then or?
Yeah. So always throughout I've been a lawyer for, 20 years this year.
We're getting old.
It's actually very close to the day I found out I passed the bar. So it's like,
was
20 years.
I think mine was, it's usually the second week. I feel like mine was November 14th maybe, but I could be wrong.
That was early. I think they started to get better at it.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure the day was December 5th.
Oh, yeah.
So it's coming up. So, throughout my entire career, I maintained some connection to the criminal justice system in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, once you're no longer prosecuting, you're no longer prosecuting.
Well, and it's very different. And I think too, I'd be interested to see sort of what you thought about your transition from the, because there's a lot of defense attorneys who are former prosecutors, and personally, I feel like we're the best bunch because. You understand it in a different way than if you just did defense work. Yeah. You understand how the prosecutor's thinking. You understand what their sort of angle is. What do you take differently from the defense side than you do from being in the DA's office?
It's a really good question, and the reason I'm glad you asked that question is because, in my opinion, the ideal district attorney will have served as a defense attorney, and because I think that. To me, being a prosecutor is like it's like you have to do that in order to be a district attorney. Right. You should have had to have done that. Right. Like you had to have done the job and come up and understand the role. Put that aside. Now, okay, what other things can really help shape a very well-rounded district attorney? And one of them is absolutely positively having served as a criminal defense attorney, ideally as a bar advocate.
Yeah.
Instead of.
And for people who might not know, what is a bar advocate?
Sure. So if you're talking about criminal defense in the Commonwealth, we're talking about either private attorneys. So everyone thinks of a defense attorney, right? You go and you hire an attorney and then you're a defense attorney. Okay. So private attorneys. And then there are private attorneys who do that. So someone could come to me and say, hey, Craig, I got arrested for OUI. I need some representation. Great. Okay. Engage them. What I also do as part of my practice is I'm on what's called a list of bar advocates for a certain court. And for me, that's Hingham District Court. It's the closest court to my office, even though it's Plymouth County. It's because Cohasset's an island in Norfolk County. We're actually in the middle of Plymouth County. But that's where I take cases off the list. And so those are called bar advocates, private attorneys who volunteer on certain days to be what's called a duty attorney. And they're sort of contract employees for CPCS, for the Committee on Public Counsel Services. And then there's public defenders. Right. And that's they're salaried, that's their job, and they work for CPCS. Right.
And people often get, I think, the two of them confused, bar advocates. And so basically as a bar advocate, what it allows you to do is practice criminally, take cases, and still have a separate practice. So if you want to do civil work or do other things on the side, that kind of thing. And there's actually, I'm sure some people have heard about the shortage with bar advocates now because of the pay and people, essentially what's happening is that they're woefully underpaid. And I did bar advocate work up until probably about a year or so ago. Yeah. And, some of the hardest working attorneys around. And now there's a shortage of attorneys because the legislature didn't address the problem when they should have, which is, and this has been an issue, coming for a long time. But I think it's a good point that to run for office and to hold the office of DA, to have the perspective from the other side. So, you spent a lot of time in the DA's office. You've spent a lot of time on the defense side. What do you think that you can do differently for Norfolk County that we're missing right now?
Sure. Let me first finish the answer to the last question before I get into sort of my vision for the role. And I'll certainly share that in a minute. But it's important about why I think that being a defense attorney is so important in creating a well-rounded DA, especially a bar advocate, because the bar advocates will encounter people that have been deemed indigent, that can't necessarily, they don't have the resources to hire their own attorney. Right. And a lot of times those are the folks that find themselves in the most challenging circumstances, and being exposed to, their lives and their perspectives is especially helpful. Because if you were just a prosecutor and you never were exposed to that, because as you know, like the defense attorney, we're privy to a lot of information that the prosecutor appropriately is not.
That's right.
And we see how it's impacting, the defendants and their families and their relationship with their children. And, we've seen how it impacts the victims. I think you can see that from both defense and prosecution. But the prosecution, they're really shielded from a lot of the considerations of the challenges that the defendants have. And obviously, if I'm running for DA, the priority here is public safety. So it's not like making things really great for people that are accused of crimes.
Right.
But it is being as well informed as possible when you're making decisions about how to, you mentioned earlier, it's not a one size fits all approach to criminal prosecution, right? That's not the job. So in order to, take a well informed approach to each case, it's good to consider thoughts like that and maybe invite the defense attorneys to share some of that information so you can work it into, what you think should be done in a particular case. It will create safer communities, because even though this sounds it might to some sound like very liberal, like soft on crime.
Sure.
It's not. It's not. Because I want people to think about, if you have someone that is, maybe they, were in recovery and they relapsed and they've gotten caught with some drugs. Okay. Not selling, just possessing. Sure. Okay. And I'm not talking about marijuana. Put that aside, because I think people have differing opinions on it. Let's say, legitimately.
I think Massachusetts is pretty on board with marijuana these days.
Sure. So let's just say cocaine or even opiates or something like that. The real stuff, okay? All right, okay. Some people would say, and maybe they've had a subsequent offense, right? They've had a history of this because they've struggled, right? Yep. They had some major event in life that led to this relapse. And they had, right before that, they had landed a great job. They had gotten housing, right? They were starting to get back on their feet.
They've got everything they need.
And then their significant other died or something tragically, right? And they just couldn't deal. So however, their record calls for it could be a reasonable ask to ask for incarceration for some period of time. But even putting someone away for 30 days or 60 days, it could create a whole, host of, it could trigger all kinds of chain reactions in terms of losing their job, it could set them back years.
Yep.
So what do we think?
Which then, when you think about it, is more likely to just keep them in the system, because then, if you're doing 30 days. And so that's what it's, it is difficult. It's more complex than I think most think, in that it's not, in some ways, we have minimum mandatories and, subsequent offenses and for the really bad stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but a lot of work, especially in the district courts, is attorneys, prosecutors, defense attorneys working together to say, hey, listen, I know it looks like A, B, C, and D, but this is why you should reconsider. And, sometimes prosecutors do, sometimes they don't, sometimes you leave it up to the court. But I think it's such an important, perspective that you point out, that many prosecutors who never go to the defense side, they really, it's a blind spot that they have that I think is, I think it's lacking, because you need to, as a prosecutor, you don't see the effects on the defendant, of their family, of sort of the long-term consequences. And to be fair, on the defense side, they're not as much looking at, the victim's family, and, so everybody sort of plays a role. But that's why it's so important to have the perspective of both, particularly when this is an agency that you want to run, and that's essentially what it's all about, is, day to day. Now, let me ask this in terms of, because different counties, many people might not know, when you have the DAs elected, they sort of get to decide how things are run, how things are implemented. When, I don't know if it was the same for you, when I was under Dan Conley in district court, we were given a lot of leeway, even as young prosecutors, and I was always told, if you can explain your decision and justify why you did A, B, C, and D, we'll back you up, because I felt like they really wanted you to use your own head and evaluate the different factors that you had in front of you when making a decision. But not all DA's offices are like that. Some DA's offices, you have to run everything all the way up the chain, which from my perspective, I don't think is good all around. What do you think about in terms of how you would manage, new young DAs, and like what responsibility you allow them to have?
So it's funny because as we're talking, we just sort of like all of a sudden veer in different directions.
Yeah, I know.
Because you and I are so excited about this. We're so passionate about this, right? You just sort of took us back to when I said there were like two halves of the answer to the question of like my takeaways from the DA's office.
Yeah.
This is the second one, and it's training, right? Training is critical for assistant DAs, especially at the district court level. By the time they get to Superior Court, they should be fairly well trained, right? They should be. So,
one would hope.
So the reason that we had autonomy in Suffolk, well, first of all, I think providing autonomy and agency to your assistants as a DA, I think broadcast to them that I remember the first assistant, again, I won't name names, saying to me on the first day, you might remember when you were in a big group of a class that you were coming in with this assistant DAs, he said, congratulations on being hired. You're here for a reason. We think you're good lawyers. We think you're going to do a good job. And when you give them autonomy and agency in the court to make the decisions, that broadcasts to them that fact, right? And I think it also, if the underlying, what I was taught was, don't just do things haphazardly. But if you have a justifiable basis, like a logical, reasonable basis for fashioning some bail request or doing, fashioning or recommending a certain sentence, whatever it is,
right?
Even if things go wrong, that person, later goes out and does something, and people could argue, well, they would have been incarcerated if they got this other sentence. Even if that happens, if there was a reason that that you did that and you fashioned that recommendation, then it's justifiable,
right?
And you should feel confident in that decision. And I think the training is critical in that, and preparing assistant DAs to do that, right?
And knowing and giving them the knowledge that they're going to be backed up, that if you do,
Exactly.
and because sometimes you make mistakes. We're all, that's something I think that's important that everybody forgets, is like, this is a human-led system, right? So police, DAs, everybody involved, judges, everyone is making what they feel like is the best decision with the information that they have at the time. Sometimes it turns out to be wrong. But if you know that you have the support of your supervisors, of the people above you who say, listen, it turned out the other way, but we can 100% see why you rationalize it this way, and we have your back. That gives the confidence to young lawyers to say, like, okay, I can trust my own gut, and we do the best that we can, right?
Sure. In some cases, it doesn't even have to be a mistake.
Right.
Right? Could have been a totally reasonable recommendation, and then you don't have a crystal ball. You can't predict, this isn't the Office of Pre-Crime from Minority Report, right? You can't predict what's going to happen. So I think that, having, and I actually think there was a lot of leading from the front with some of our leadership, like the chief of district courts would come out there into the district courts and sort of show you how it's done.
Yep.
That is what you need to see. And I've seen it in a lot of DA's offices. I've even seen it in Norfolk when I was taking cases there. I don't really take cases in Norfolk right now.
Yeah.
But it's critical. It's a critical piece. And I think Suffolk always did a really good job of that. I do practice in counties now where the DAs do not have a lot of autonomy, and I think it creates a very negative environment for those assistant DAs, because they have to run every decision up the flagpole. The defense bar is like, rolling eyes, like, what are we doing here? These people are salaried lawyers to prosecute cases. They can't make any decisions. I think it tells them that they're not able to, they're not, capable of doing it. It's just, it's tough.
Well, and it also takes away, one of the big things about being a lawyer is the ability to negotiate, right?
Sure.
So, if I know as the prosecutor in a district court that I can't ultimately make the decision, what is the point of even going back and forth? Because, I think something that maybe a lot of people don't recognize is, when I was in Dorchester, there were 13 or 14 of us. We were well staffed at the time, a little tiny basement and a little tiny, probably my desk was the size of this chair with, 350 cases. Yep. And a defense attorney might come to me and I might offer something completely differently than the DA sitting next to me. And that's because we all, like I said, we all come to it with different perspectives, different experiences. And, to be able to myself, that it really, I think helped my ability, helped in my ability to sort of rationalize, okay, this is where they're coming from. What are the things I should consider in their argument? What's persuasive, what's not? And then to feel the confidence in making the decision for myself, instead of having to go, to my boss and say, is this okay that I, give him a cough instead of a probation?
Right.
No, it's, you want to be able to, because if you don't have that autonomy at the district court level, what happens when you're in Superior Court? And once you're in Superior Court, maybe for people who don't know, so district court level is generally less serious offenses. Not that serious things can't happen in district court, but once you're indicted and you're in Superior Court, the consequences are generally much more significant, right? So we have, more serious crimes, more serious injuries, victims. There's a sort of a plethora of things you have to consider. And if you can't make decisions at the district court level, how can we have confidence that you're making the right decisions at the Superior Court
You're not getting
level?
the requisite training.
Right.
That's you're not.
Right.
You're going.
So
to
is
Superior
that
Court.
something from your perspective you would, from the ground up, start like, this is how we're going to do it in district court, so that we make sure as everybody moves up through the system, we know what we're getting?
Yeah. So to be completely clear, and obviously there are crimes like homicides that that there's no place for in district court. But to me, district court is the genesis of true public safety in the community. The district courts are where you're going to see most street level crimes, most quality of life crimes prosecuted. And it's important that you have really capable teams in place there, especially your supervisors.
When you say quality of life crimes, what are those kinds of, like at the district court, what is the stuff that people are seeing, in the communities? Like, is it trespasses, shopliftings, those kinds of things?
Yes. So you're going to see all of a sudden you and your neighbor's cars are getting broken into, right? You're seeing, with the, like retail centers within your town, there's a lot of shoplifting, right? There's drug use in certain areas, right? And there's people on the street using drugs in certain areas or even selling them, right? There's, certain areas where there might be some violent crime where you wouldn't want to go at night, right? So I think that primarily these types of crimes are the ones that Norfolk residents are the ones that confront the most,
they're seen on a daily basis.
Thankfully, we don't see a lot of homicides, right? In Norfolk County. We don't see a lot of, major bank robberies, things like that, right?
Sure. You're seeing the everyday crimes that are, the people are feeling, the regular, Joe Schmo, 2 kids, and saying hey, this is affecting our community, and what's the DA's office doing about it?
Exactly. Again, a lot of it is addiction born, right? You're seeing OUIs, you're seeing drug cases where maybe someone was driving on the influence and got in an accident, hurt someone. You're seeing shoplifting, property crimes, theft, like I said, breaking into cars because people are trying to steal, to either sell things on, online to get money to feed the addiction, or because they're not working. It's just, that is where, so the place where you're going to be able to roll out policies and programs, initiatives that try to get at the root causes of those types of crimes are district court.
Is it district court? Yeah.
It's super important. So I will 100%, if I'm elected district attorney, I will be in the district court courtrooms at first, especially because it accomplishes 2 things. It'll help, I think, train the assistant DAs, the new ones. The veterans don't need the training of this type, but the newer ones see, this guy's leading from the front. This is sort of how to do it, know. And it's not just one size fits all. One approach is the right one, but you can see how your district attorney is doing. I never saw a DA, and I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm just saying I've never seen a district attorney in a district court courtroom. And I think it would go a long way. I think it would go a long way with the bench. I think it would go a long way with the defense attorneys. I think it would go a long way with your assistant DAs. And in addition to training everyone, it would allow, and this is one of the reasons I would do it, it would allow me to really get to know my district court lawyers really well. If I was elected and the county's assistant DAs in district court, I would be able to get to know them much better than just seeing them every once in a while in some office-wide function or something like that, or when I hire them and then I don't see them again.
It doesn't hurt that everybody is always on notice. So the boss might show up at any time. So we have to be, really thinking about being best with that we possibly can, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't want them to think that. I want them to think I want them. I hear you.
Okay.
I mean, it's I know the cops have a speed trap on this road, so I'm not going to go that fast.
Yeah.
But really, I would want people I would be sitting there maybe I'd stand up sometimes, or maybe I'd be the one filling out some of the paperwork while everyone else is doing it.
I love that. I mean, I really do. I love that because I just feel like there is a disconnect between sort of the role of DA is interesting because it's a political figurehead in the sense that you're elected, But at the same time, you're the head lawyer, right? In the county, you're running the organization. And sometimes there's a disconnect between like what's actually going on in the person at the very top. So even just the idea of, you being in a district court, and obviously that's not going to be doing every single day, but hey, make it a priority to, once or twice a month, you pick a different district court, you go, see how things are going, what's working, what's not. And you don't get that unless you're on the ground talking to people.
You would never get it. It's like, again, that unique perspective that you'd never see unless you're doing a certain thing like the defense bar, that unique perspective. Same thing. If you're not in, and I think that, you just join. I think you'd go for like the way I'm looking. I mean, it's sort of half baked at this point, but the way I'm sort of like anticipating it or contemplating it is like you go there and for a week you set up shop in a district court and you practice. And maybe you're one of the guys that, like you were saying, they need coverage. And there's a trial going, and you're on your way up the stairs, and someone's like, "Hey, Craig, we don't have anyone. If someone banged out sick, and be like, all right."
Then you know what will happen then? You'll be like, "The DA's in third session trying a case. Everybody go watch."
But that's great.
I love it.
Great
I love the idea.
And maybe it's a bad case, right?
Right.
And then maybe the DA loses that case, right? And it shows everyone like you can't win them all, right? And it's not about winning. It's about putting the best evidence forward and seeing if the trier of fact, the judge or the jury, thinks that you've proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's all it's about. And there's no perfect way to try a case,
right?
And I think
every lawyer is different.
That's it. And I think it would teach a lot of lessons, right? Like, here's the guy, he's been doing it for 20 years, and he's the district attorney, and he just caught a not guilty on an OUI or something like that. And it's like, hey, it happens, guys. It's okay, right? That's fine. And maybe you learned how to give an opening, or maybe you learned some good things about direct examination across from a guy that's been doing it for a while. But just because I've been elected doesn't mean I'm the best lawyer in the United States of America.
Well, then you're going to win every case. Right,
exactly.
And I think that's, it's important to reiterate that it's not, obviously, both sides want to win, but that's not the function of the district attorney.
100%.
It's not to win cases.
Absolutely.
It's to serve justice. And so the way in which most prosecutors, I think about it is, we're attempting to make sure justice is served on behalf of a victim or this and that. But it's not about this, sometimes people think it's like, oh, they just want to win. And that's not, and if you're a prosecutor and you just want to win, you're in the wrong job.
Agreed.
You're not doing it for the right reasons. And, because I think that, let's get maybe a little bit to like what's going on in Norfolk County and, the Karen Reed case. And, because it's been a little difficult for me. Sometimes I get everybody knows I get a lot of pushback because, it's nuanced, right? Like there's such a mess, but at the same time, I know that there's good people doing good work, in the office, within the police organizations. And what's happening now is these, there's sort of bad apples amongst some, and it's tainting the entire system. And we have I have a premium chat for my followers on Substack, and I asked some of them to submit questions, and I got a good one from her. Name is Ash. She's actually from Worcester, but she said, if you win, how are you going to change the public's perception of Norfolk County after the Reed case? Which I thought was a really good question, because it's not only important for the voters of Norfolk County, but sort of our system as a whole, that people are feeling very distrustful of what's happening in our political system, whether it's, in the White House, it's DC, it's on, the governor's level. What would be your priority in trying to reinstill the trust in an organization? Because you really need the trust of the public in order to function effectively.
Right. So first of all, thanks, Ashley, for the question, because it is the question, because that is the problem right now in Norfolk County, is that there's been this erosion of public trust, of public confidence in our criminal justice complex, for lack of a better phrase.
It's a good way to put it.
In Norfolk County. Okay. There are warranted questions about, the district attorney himself and his ability to effectively manage the office, effectively manage the budget, about the professionalism and objectivity of our, some law enforcement officers. I think it captures a lot of a whole spectrum of things. So, the priority, the top priority for the next DA will be to restore the public's trust and confidence in our criminal justice complex here in Norfolk County. How do we do that? First and foremost is that sort of accessibility and visibility that I was talking about earlier. Okay. One of the major problems in Norfolk County is that the district attorney is, he's disengaged. He's just not accessible. He's not visible. No one ever sees them and sees them in their community. You know, my own community in Cohasset, we had this grisly homicide that you've talked about on your show before, the Anna Walsh murder. Okay. And, we have a small community in Cohasset. Luckily, just like most of Norfolk County, things like that don't happen a lot, right? So everyone, it was really traumatic and tragic. And they had kids that went to the school, and not once did the DA come out to talk about it or address the community and say, hey, everyone, this is a really disturbing tragedy. It's traumatic. And can't disseminate information about the investigation.
Right.
But here's the process. Here's what you can expect. Here are the investigators that are involved. Here are the representatives from my office that are involved. Here's who you can connect with any issues, with any concerns, with any information that might be helpful. Nothing like that, right? No outreach. And that's just one example.
No visibility.
There's just no connection to the community. So you have to, because in
a case like that, and in other cases, that's what the community, that's what the public's looking for. Who's the person in charge, and like tell us what's going on. And so when you don't even have that from the office as a whole, what happens is then people are left to their own devices, and a lot of the things that come from it and thoughts and conclusions, some of them might be accurate, some of them might be not, but we don't see anybody coming out to really effectively rebut or explain things.
Because a connection, that builds a relationship.
Right.
And a relationship builds trust. Okay. And right now there is none. So it's going to be a slow roll because you have to earn trust.
Right.
It's not given.
You can't just come in day one and say, "Oh, I'm Craig Maclellan. Everyone's going to trust me because I'm different."
Trust me, I'm a lawyer. Right. So you have to get out there and prove to people that you're worthy of their trust. And the way to do that in one of my one part of my overall vision for the office is to have these, and you've heard me talk about this before, have these sort of public safety forums in each community.
Yep.
Okay. And saying, get out there and say, hey, Milton, we're going to be coming out and we're going to be hosting a public safety forum. And at this public safety forum, everything's fair game. You got problems with the office, you got concerns. Let's talk about it, because dissent is a parent of productivity and progress. But here's what's on the docket for us. We're going to go over the recent crime stats in Milton. I'm using Milton. That's where we're sitting right now. So I'm using that as an example, right? And the arrest rates, the conviction rates, what types of crimes we're seeing, where we're seeing them.
Yep.
Right. And we're going to talk about what we propose to do.
Yep.
Like I was talking about earlier, programs, initiatives, in-court practices that seek to target the root causes of these crimes so that we can try to eradicate them, make Milton a safer community. We're going to try and figure that out together. And then once we all decide on a program or a policy or initiative that we're going to roll out, we're going to go do that, and we're going to come back to you in whatever, 6 months, a year's time, whatever makes sense, in 18 months.
And see how it's working.
Say, hey, is this working? We're going to go over the same stats,
Right.
same trends, same arrest and conviction rates. Is it working? And if it's not, we're going to decide how to pivot together. These types of things, you don't just do that once, right? This is continuous, sort of like purposeful and meaningful engagement with the community. And initially, it's going to be hard to get people there.
Sure.
Right. So you're going to have to figure out, but this is the DA's job, to get people interested in this, build awareness and educate them about what's going on, because that is how he's held accountable. Right. You literally have to arm people with the information to hold you accountable. That is good government. Right.
That's right.
Now, the other half so that's part of my answer to Ashley's question. Okay. And that's part of how I want to start to rebuild trust. The other way is to engage in or innovate more proactive crime prevention efforts or programs. Okay, so I always say, because we talked about education earlier, it's a great example of one, is that's sort of proactively partnering with our school districts throughout the county. Not to necessarily teach kids math and science, okay? Yeah. But you can collaborate with district leadership to conceive, developmentally appropriate, quasi-regular programming in the schools, where you come and talk to the kids about, good decision making and
Yep.
weighing the consequences of your actions, how to manage a responsible and respectful digital footprint. What happens
Yep.
when you send something out to the internet, about yourself or others? Like, what impact does it have? How long does it last? How permanent is that
Right.
information? How public is it? Right. Getting kids to think about that, so that, because we know like the unique challenges that kids, as they're growing up, they confront, right? Social challenges. So this will outfit them with some additional resources, so that they might be able to confront those challenges a little bit more successfully when they come about, and when they're not going to, sort of balloon into like juvenile justice or even adult justice issues.
Well, and we know that, from statistics and just being in the system anecdotally, that if you can intervene, the younger you can intervene with kids, and sometimes even if that's just a little bit of programming, sometimes if that's a representative in the schools, that that kids start to, once they go on a path one way or the other, kids who are committing crimes turn into adults who are committing crimes, and whether you're a juvenile or an adult, those are the things that are affecting the community. And so I think that's a really interesting. I think what people are looking for is to have their voice heard in a different way. And I think the idea of having, community, sort of outreach programs on a regular basis, like you said, it probably takes some time to get people out. But once they know, hey, the DA or a representative is going to be there, someone from the police department here, a little bit of everything, say like, we want to know what's going on, because we're the ones who are in charge of making sure you feel safe, right? It's ultimately the job of the district attorney's office to make sure the community feels safe. And I just think that, there has been such, it's unfortunate to watch what has happened with, the Reed case, through the trials, the aftermath, and how much, how much distrust has really been created. And, did you follow the trial closely, or obviously it's difficult not to follow the trial, but, what's your general kind of vibe about where did they go wrong, and how did things get so off track? Like what's your take? And I know, to be fair, you're running for district attorney, and I'm sure you haven't seen the file itself. As we know, there's probably a lot more information that's not publicly available, that there's, why certain decisions are being made. But as an attorney, just, even myself from outside looking in, it just feels like every time a mistake could be made, it was made, and where can we kind of work on that?
So I think with, I think what the Reed case really did was probably highlight things that had already existed, but now they existed in a much more,
in a big way,
in a much more public bubble,
yeah.
Right? I think that there were numerous elements that led to, I think, that disintegration of the system in that particular case, and I think you start with just from the first stage, investigative stage. I think there were, and I want to preface, anytime I'm critical, because I've worked with law enforcement for a long time, for the majority of my career, right? Whether it's been the defense side or prosecution side. And the vast majority of men and women in that profession that I've engaged with they're total professionals.
Yeah, good people.
And some of them actually especially impressive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I would agree.
But I think that the Reed case highlighted to everyone that there is definitely room for improvement in some of the investigative processes. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, first and foremost, I think that we may want to rethink how we approach unattended death investigations in Norfolk County. Right now, most of the counties, with the exception of Suffolk, it's a different beast, because they've got the BPD for most of the county.
Right.
But most district attorneys utilize these what are called SPDUs, State Police Detective Units, and they used to be called CPAC units. Yep. They're not under any obligation to do that, to use them exclusively. I think you certainly involve the state police. Sure. Again, an organization that I've been generally impressed with the men and women that I've dealt with in that organization. Are there people that maybe lack competence? For sure. Yep. But so I think that, and they have a great deal of resources, right? So you definitely, I'm not saying exclude them, But like, what about bringing in some of the local talent too?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you would think too that the local PD would, aside from the resources, but if we figure out how to ensure that they have the resources, that in some ways they're probably in the best place. They're in the communities where any of these crimes are happening. Yeah.
So if they're looking to track someone down,
Right.
they might know
Right.
who's friends with who,
Right.
where they
More
might
than
be.
the state police
so
would.
and
Right.
there's you go to people that might have a certain level of experience or a supervisory rank, whatever,
Yep.
and you try and maybe create some sort of application process
Yep.
for whatever you want to call it, a elite, major crimes
Yep.
investigative body, okay, in Norfolk County, and you can incorporate other folks and resources. When I say resources of the state, I'm talking about like the state lab, things like that. But resources is another issue, I think, on the investigative level, not just the caliber of professional that you have as an individual, the human being
Yep.
there, but also, like in the Reed case, we saw, they were struggling to preserve the crime scene because
Right.
they were up against some fairly difficult weather conditions.
Right.
But and oftentimes, as you know, Catherine, the seasoned investigators aren't the first ones on the scene.
No,
A lot of times,
right.
first responders, there's
Right.
patrolmen on the scene.
Right.
So if they don't have like a crime scene, sort of kit that they can use to at least preliminarily secure
Right.
the scene, and things like evidence collection receptacles, digital camera, some tape,
Just
some
basic.
some tarp,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
things like that, right? Where it wouldn't be. They're all most police officers drive around in SUVs now,
Right.
right? So they have the space for this, for
Right.
something like this, and it just then you're avoiding things where I honestly think they were probably doing the best they could with the solo cups, trying to think of ways to deal
Right.
with this, right? Because it was evidence that was before their eyes,
Right.
vanishing.
Right. So, I mean,
So-
it's funny. It's one of those things that I do think, they both in the first trial and the second trial, like the weather was hammered home and it became sort of this joke. But I do think again, it's complex. It's not as simple as, oh, well, the scene wasn't secured and this and that. And they were in the middle of a blizzard. And like you said, if there's blood in the ground, you're like, I don't have anything, scoop it up and hope for the best. And, obviously that's not the best practices. But even like you're saying, having the necessary means to secure the scene, because I think one of the problems in the Reed case was it was essentially left unsecured for hours, and just that in and of itself, if the scene had been secured from the moment the call came in with the cruiser station there, and then, crime scene comes in, we might have a different kind of analysis. But what it does is, opens up this whole line of questioning to like, well, how can we trust any of this because the basics weren't done? And I think that goes to this kind of, I see personally, a lot of laziness and maybe some incompetence, and
Sure.
as opposed to,
Absolutely.
deliberate stuff, but that it doesn't really matter in a way, because if we have, if you're just doing the bare minimum, well, that's going to be challenged at some point, and it's been challenged in a very, very big way. That's brought all of kind of this stuff, to the forefront, and to be quite frank, it should, because this is not how investigations should be done, and we should be holding all of us, whether you're a prosecutor or whether you're police, we should be holding everybody to the to the highest standard. So, I think we need some of that to reinstill the trust, because it's pretty much, I'm sure it's pretty much gone in Norfolk County.
It is, and again, that's the reason I'm running.
Yeah.
Sitting back as someone that's done this for 20 years, it's like something's got to be done about
Yeah.
this. And I feel like my experience, both in the professional realm and in law, but also in this public service role that I have, uniquely qualifies me to rectify this situation. I feel like I have the solution. And I hope I get the chance to roll it out. But getting back to the issues, the recase, so there's investigative phase issues too. But then you look at what happens once it leaves the investigators
The
present
police,
to the DA's
right?
office,
Because
right?
because what sometimes people don't recognize is this sort of levels to an investigation. It starts at the police level, and so even the initial charges for Karen Reed, which she was charged with manslaughter in the district court, that would have been decided basically by the police, right? So at this point, there's not a lot of DA input until things kind of escalate as it goes.
They may have with unintended deaths, they may have some sort of, like when you and I were in Suffolk, they had what's called homicide response. So there might have been some assistance from the DA's office in terms of determining what the initial charging was going to be.
Yeah.
They also know where it's a death, there'll be a grand jury investigation.
Right.
So the grand jury needs to be truly used as a fact-finding body. Right. You can't go in there with any preconceived notions. Right. And so I see a lot of DA's offices using these second-degree murder charges in vehicular manslaughter cases or vehicular homicide cases.
And do you see them doing it successfully anywhere?
Sometimes, because sometimes it's warranted, right?
Yeah,
One thing that like comes to mind is there was a case where some guy was at a party and was, completely intoxicated and then was like doing all kinds of drugs as well.
And then
got in his car. I think it might have. Yes, I think so.
And he got a big sentence.
Got in his car, and then he killed someone.
Yep.
And they were able to show that there was a complete disregard for human life there, and he was reckless, right?
Yep.
And so it's I think at least provable in that scenario.
Sure.
I think you'd have reasonable minds disagree in terms of whether it was warranted or not. But sometimes it is warranted. It's a justifiable charge. I think in the Reed case, that was a tough decision. I think that might have been one of the most critical decisions in this entire thing that sort of like rolled out before our eyes. Because I just don't. I think it contributed to maybe mismanaging the Officer O'Keefe's family's expectations.
Yep.
It I think sort of forced prosecutors' hands in terms of strategy and what they were going to do and how they're going to approach it. I mean, sometimes even at trial when I was a prosecutor, I would charge certain things, and you probably did the same thing. Once you're moving for trial, you think about, okay, what do I actually have the evidence? What do I think I can in good faith prove beyond a reasonable doubt?
Right.
And I would just right there not move for trial on some of the charges, and I'd hone in on the ones I thought that I had a good faith basis moving forward on, because I could prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I feel like not enough maybe thought was put into that, not by the rank and file assistant DAs. And I should preface anything I talk about with the DAs, and this is important because I think you would agree with this. I'm running for DA because I think the office can deliver a much higher caliber level of service to the county, to the residents. I think that right now, as we're sitting here right now, I think there are a lot of really talented, hardworking legal professionals in that office.
Yep.
The assistant DAs, I do not really blame them for any sort of...
And it's going to be hard, to be honest, it's going to be hard if you're, a line DA just doing your job in Norfolk County. It's got to be difficult.
Could you imagine it, right?
Yeah,
and you want to have pride in what you do for a living.
Sure.
And I think we did when we did that, right?
Absolutely.
And these guys should still have pride in what they do. It's an important public service, and I think they probably day in, day out, they grind it out, right? And they're not doing it for the money. They're not paid, $500,000 a year to do this job.
They're not in on a conspiracy.
and so I think they're just just showing up to work every day. And I think people need to recognize that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think those people they're doing their best. But I think with the DA's office, really the failures lie at the feet of the elected.
Yeah.
And it just does.
Yeah.
I mean, it just does. And it's nothing personal. Michael Morrissey, he's the elected official right now. He's the district attorney. I do think that the office is failing the community. And that's why the community feels that, they don't trust. I mean, if the community does not trust the chief law enforcement organization in the county, that's a real problem, Catherine. Right. So, and that rests at the foot of the DA.
And it just trickles all the way down. If it's from the very top, and if there's no trust at the top, then, how do you have trust in the rest of the system as a whole? And I think that's what's happening. And, I think it sort of seems to be all at the right time that, this all came to the forefront, and it was as a result of the Reed case. And, there's lots of people who have lots of different perspectives on it and different thoughts. But, it is interesting. I do think that it's really been my opinion that the charging with the second degree murder sort of, changed the whole direction, because not only in terms of, as you were saying, maybe managing the O'Keefe's expectations about what's to come out, but you go from charging someone with theoretically might have been an accident while intoxicated to, to something that, in most worlds, you maybe do a couple of months, you get a suspended sentence, move on with your life. This is an accident, to charging someone with second-degree murder, which carries, life in prison without the possibility of parole. So for 20 years. So you also force a defendant's hand when, okay, well, now I'm not just defending, like trying to keep me out of jail for a couple of months. You want to put me in jail for the rest of my life? Like, and so it changes the entire, case. And so like those decisions, come from the top down. And so I think it's just reflective of, that there just needs to be some new blood in the system. I think that people, not only from within, but so that people from the outside in the community can have some, some faith and restore, really what we expect of our elected officials, right? Is we want to be able to trust that what they're saying is the truth, and we want to hear from them, and we want to, even having conversations like this, for me, it's really important. What I'm trying to do here is to bring sort of, a more in-depth perspective to people who are running for office or who are in office, who care about these things, that it's not just, we're hearing little, press releases or quick sound bites. I think people of Norfolk County and of Massachusetts everywhere deserve to hear more from the people who, want to represent them. So I appreciate you coming on. So listen, I could talk forever. So we're going to, I have some sort of fun wrap-up questions for you. We're just going to go at them. Okay, so favorite movie?
Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that one.
Yes.
Why?
So I bet you haven't seen it in a while. Have you seen it in a while?
Yeah, I also am not. I'm such a little bitch. I hate scary movies. Like literally, it's too scary for me.
The only scary part though is in the very end. But that movie is a masterpiece. It's like it captures that time era so well with like the colors and the costumes and the acting is ridiculously good. And there's just so many memorable scenes from it.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're perfectly cast, and it's just. It's a masterpiece. Everything about it, and it was one of the only movies that won. I think it's called like the Big Five. It's like best actor, best actress, best picture, best director, best original screenplay. I think and there's only a few of them that did that.
Yeah, probably.
So I feel like I'm not alone in this, but that's my favorite.
No, it's just
that's my top.
I don't know. I didn't have expectations. But
people
maybe
view
I
it
had
as like horror. It's not really like, to me. It's like a crime drama, like crime thriller. And so it is scary at the end when he's walking around with like the night goggles and stuff. That's scary. But that was only like a couple minutes of it. So
it's too scary for me, but not for you. All right. Favorite Boston sports moment?
I feel like the two that come to mind immediately is the field goal in the snow. But also, to me, I'm a big Bruins guy.
Yeah.
So Bobby Orr.
Yeah.
Just that memorable. And it's just like, it's amazing. It's just like so cool. Whenever you see it, you get chills.
Bobby Orr.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so awesome. And he's just like, he's a great like Boston sports representative. And like, I don't know. I love the Garden and all that stuff. So I think I'm
the
partial
nostalgia of it.
Partial
Bruins,
to that moment for the Bees.
Best book you've read lately?
So because I read so much for a living.
Yeah, I know.
Cases and all that stuff, right? Usually the reading is professional based. So, it was called The Anxious Generation. It's an education based
Jonathan Haidt.
book. Okay.
Love it.
All right. And
Love
it's because it helps me be a better like school committee member. And we're trying to develop policies right now around that.
Yep.
So,
is for people who don't know, it's about, kind of cell phones and technology. Are there school, phones allowed in Cohasset?
Not anymore. So we had.
Love it.
So this is a great example of what I would bring. We started with a community read.
Yep.
And then we had a community discussion about the book because everyone was worried about cell phones and kids. And then the school committee piloted a program where the kids didn't have phones and how we worked that out. So we, anticipate any unintended consequences. And then we made it official. And now the high schoolers have no one has any phones during the day.
I love it.
You know what happened? The first day that we piloted that program.
Yep.
The high school principal texted me and said, the cafeteria has never been louder.
I have to tell you, it's one of the, it's amazing. It's something as, we both have young kids, mine is 6 and 9. And it's something that I really, really pay attention to. We're very like on the other side of technology, even though I'm like literally with a phone in my face all the time. But you know, it's really interesting to watch this sort of grassroots movement in the country. I've never seen anything happen so fast than schools being taken. I think it's like 35 states now mandating no phones in school. And all of the feedback is basically like, the kids are learning, they're talking, they're asking questions. So something as simple as, you know, just like changing someone's perspective. And once you get enough people to do it, everybody else joins on.
Why have we not rolled that out in Massachusetts, Catherine?
I don't know. That's a good question.
It's crazy.
You would think of all places we'd be at the forefront of that.
A big education state. We always talk about how seriously we take it. It bothers me. This is the type of stuff like inaction.
Yes.
Let's go here. This is important. This is really important.
Right.
I mean, even the adults walk around looking at these things all the time. Can you imagine growing up with that?
Right.
It's crazy.
No, and it's really, you know, I think I talk about it a lot on my TikTok and my Instagram, and the pushback I generally get is that people are afraid because of, you know, school shootings and all this kind of stuff about, you know, I won't be able to get in touch with my kids. I don't personally, I don't find that particularly persuasive. It's not that that's not a real fear, because that is a realistic fear for all of us these days. But, you know, the detriment to these kids like living in a phone is just so significant that I'm glad that sort of the generation of parents with younger kids, because I do think that the parents who are a little bit older than us who have kids in high school, they almost didn't know, and it was like too late before they were able to kind of catch it. So if you start from the bottom side and say like, okay, you get a little bit of technology here that, you know, we're doing for Christmas for my 9-year-old, we're doing a landline.
Okay.
It's called Tin Can.
Okay.
Not a sponsor, but I love the idea of it. And you can approve who can call in, who can call out.
Okay.
And it's great. So then there's no text, no internet, no that kind of stuff. So I love
that.
I love the anxious generation. He has made Jonathan Haidt has like single-handedly changed the perspective, I feel like, of the country. So super impressive.
Impactful fellow for sure, yeah.
Best place you've ever visited?
Oh, that's really Egypt.
Oh, Egypt. Oh, did you go to the pyramids?
Yes. So, I mean, I have to, just because it's such a, like, that's like the big grand trip I took as a person. Like, I mean,
pretty cool.
I went when I was in college with my father.
Yeah.
And
impressive,
it was, pretty yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's just, how lucky am I to have been able to do that, right?
You think it was humans? You think it was aliens? What? I mean,
I think it was probably humans. I think it was probably humans. I think so.
God, how did they pull those up? I don't know. I don't know. I worry. I'm like, what? I don't know. All right. And finally, dead or alive, who would you like to have dinner with?
I just, you know what? I think there are a lot of people in history that I'd like to meet, but for me, my rock, my constant is my wife and kids.
I love it. I love it.
And just having dinner with them, having pizza movie night every Saturday, that's enough for me.
Yep.
I don't need to have, you know, dinner with John F. Kennedy or anything like that. I'd rather just be able to do that for years to come, and everyone's happy and healthy. That's what I want.
And hear what happened for the week with the kids. And isn't it? You know, it's. I think that's something that a lot of people, sort of post COVID, have really reflected on. Is that, you know, what's important in life, and what it comes down to is really love and relationships and being around the people who you enjoy and you care about. So, Craig Maclellan, thank you for coming. I really appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Where can, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you? How would they?
Yep, they can email me. Just go to my website, CraigMaclellan.com. That's CraigMaclellan. Hopefully I spelled that right.
Yeah.
.com. And my email.
We're working on getting social media so people can see you a little bit more.
We're figuring out how to roll that out. I'm figuring out how to do a responsible social media campaign for this local office. But my email is on there, and you know, also feel free to give me a call and text me 617-750-0277. 617-750-0277.
A man for the people.
You got it.
Thank you, Craig.
Around.
You're the best. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I wish you all the luck in the world.
Well, thank you so much.
If you like this episode, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Every bit helps. Thanks for watching Note My Objections. See you next week.